There is a question that has been burning my soul for several months now that I can never quite seem to get a very satisfying answer to. And that is, why do Jehovah's Witnesses seem so depressed lately? Why does the organization seem so unrecognizable from my memory of being a Jehovah's Witness? And I tend to be a little bit of a compulsive person. I was trying to learn a yo-yo trick one time, and I kept at it until my fingers were literally bleeding. And instead of stopping, I went on Amazon one-day delivery and I bought some yo-yo gloves, so that way the blood wouldn't interfere with the string, so I could keep practicing until I figured it out. And I took this intensity, this obsession that I can have when I hyperfixate on something, and I applied it to this question. I said, Wally, you are going to sit down and figure this thing out. And boy howdy, I really think I figured it out. A lot of tears, a lot of laughter, and about 4 gallons of coffee later, I think I finally have a good answer. So buckle up and let's do this. I think before we get started, we need to quickly identify what is the core identity of Jehovah's Witnesses. What is so intrinsic and coded into their DNA that it literally just makes them who they are? And the reason I think this is important is because when I think of my own life and the times when I've been the most depressed and sad, it is when I have some type of identity crisis. I thought I knew who I was and where I was going, and suddenly I didn't. I didn't know who I was, and I didn't know where I was going. Now, the easy thing to do is to point to very specific points in your life, and you can say, well, that happened, and therefore that's when I lost my identity. That's the very easy way to look at it. But oftentimes what happens in our lives is we have these little tiny things that are constantly happening that slowly build up over time, and they're almost imperceptible. Because when it's easy to be depressed and say, well, that thing made me depressed, this moment made me depressed, when in reality, it was all of these little things that were happening without you even noticing. And that is when the real depression comes, because you don't have something to point to. You can't point to an event and you just say, well, man, why am I so depressed? So I think it's good to then establish, well, what is the identity of Jehovah's Witnesses if we're looking for clues as to how they're feeling now. And at the very core of it is their names that they've had throughout the years. So just to explain this, I'm going to let Watchtower speak for itself here, but recently they built a historic museum at their world headquarters, and it talks about the names that they've given themselves and exactly why that gives them their identity. Take a listen.
A People for Jehovah's Name at world headquarters in Warwick is more than a history museum. It's the modern-day story of a people seeking to know the true God and to do His will. But this isn't just any story. It's our story. So let's take a thrilling journey back in time. The story unfolds on the narrative wall and in several galleries along the way. We begin in the 1870s, when a small group in Allegheny, Pennsylvania, decided to re-examine the Bible. As C.T. Russell reasoned,
all the creeds of Christendom claim to be founded on the Bible, and these are conflicting. Is it possible that the Bible has been misrepresented?
The more they learned, the more they wanted to share. So in 1879, they began publishing Zion's Watchtower. Readers were soon taking a stand for the truths that they were learning.
So if you went up to Jehovah's Witnesses standing at some cart or wherever you might happen to meet them and you asked them what makes them Jehovah's Witnesses, I would say 90% of the time you are going to get an answer that sounds something like, well, we love our God Jehovah, and therefore we love His Word, the Bible, which compels us to study it and apply all of the lessons in our life. And because of that love for our God Jehovah and our love for the Bible, we have an extension of that to love our neighbors and love other people, and that makes us preach to them. So at the very core of what it means to be a Jehovah's Witness is to be a preacher of the Bible and a student of the Bible. That's why they've had the names. They were Bible students, and now they're known as Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, another key component to being a Jehovah's Witness and with their identity is that the end is always right around the corner. You are always living in the last days, the last part of the last days. Your tippy toes, those little piggies are hanging off the cliff, and on the other side of the cliff, that's Armageddon, always right there around the corner. And a lot of implications have come about because of this idea that you are living in the last days. And those are that you're going to be persecuted by Satan, that you'd face a lot of difficulties and challenges. As the world continued to progress, the longer it went on, the more difficult it would be for you to maintain your faith.
Satan still challenges the integrity of Jehovah's people. In fact, the Bible indicates that Satan will increase his attacks on Jehovah's people in these last days. And we see this happening.
Now, the organization has always had the exact same recipe for dealing with this progressive increase in the struggles that people would face. And that has been to study and to preach. At the very end of the day, it's pray, study, and preach. Those are the most important things that Jehovah's Witnesses can do.
Why is study so important? Only by study can we keep a tight grip on the word of life. When the Apostle Paul penned these words, he was imprisoned and nearing the end of his action-packed life. He had been the apostle to the nations and had spent his best years taking the word of God to the then-known world. Imagine the joy Paul felt when he was reunited in the heavenly resurrection with those who listened to his admonition to keep a tight grip on the word of life. Paul's words can help us gain the prize of eternal life. They imprint in our hearts and minds a basic exhortation that will lead us through these last days and into our everlasting reward. The question is, will we remain blameless and without blemish in the midst of this crooked and twisted generation of our day? Will we rejoice with other faithful servants of God in the new world? We can and we will if we take to heart Paul's counsel to keep a tight grip on the word of life.
So you can see this reinforces their identity. Remind yourself of who you are. You are one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And what do? We study and we preach. Now, in order to preach, you need something to talk about. And in order to study, you need something to study. And so that's where the organization has always come into play. They've given Jehovah's Witnesses the tools to study and preach. So hopefully you guys are following my logic here. But you would imagine then, if you're always right on the cusp, and as you get closer to the end at Armageddon, you would need more things to study and more things to preach. You would need access to more tools that would be in proportion to greater tests of your faith that you would be experiencing towards the time of the end. It only makes sense. So, with all of that being said, have Jehovah's Witnesses been receiving more spiritual food as the day draws closer towards Armageddon? No, and it's not particularly close. I first became aware of the disparity in spiritual food when I noticed that they released a Awake magazine. And I asked myself, wait, when's the last time I actually read an Awake magazine? And I looked and realized that it was only being produced once per year. And I was like, wait, when did that happen? I don't remember them only making one Awake per year. And if I did notice it, I've completely forgotten about it. And then I looked at their public editions of the Watchtower, and they only make one of those per year as well. Now, this is a big shock to me because the Watchtower that I remember that I grew up in is you got a 32-page Watchtower or an Awake twice a month. So every week you had a new topic, basically, to talk about with people when you were preaching and different articles and things to study. It reinforced your very core identity of being a student and a preacher. So I thought maybe I was the bozo here in this situation, and I decided to call up some of my EXJW friends, and I just wanted to ask them, hey, did you know that they only make one public Watchtower and one Awake? And not a single one of them either realized it. And then I made a video, and one of the first comments I got on that video was someone saying that their Jehovah's Witness husband was out preaching, and they had a conversation or something, previously, and he didn't know that they only make one Awake per year. Even believing Jehovah's Witnesses that drink up everything that comes out of the organization, and they smell every fart from the governing body and are like, thank you so much for this rich spiritual food. Not even they noticed that they weren't getting fed spiritual food anymore. It had vanished, and somehow ex-Jehovah's Witnesses and Jehovah's Witnesses didn't really pay that much attention to. And it really got my curiosity because, like I said at the beginning, could this be an identity crisis where you can't just point to something and say, oh, well, this is the JW broadcasting. Oh, this is the pandemic. That's why I'm feeling so depressed being a Jehovah's Witness. Those are like very specific things. What if it's something that snuck up on them and they weren't even aware of it? Those are the things that cause real hardcore depression. And so I wanted to explore what the feeling would be if I was a Jehovah's Witness, living in their heyday when they had 5-6% growth every year, back in the 90s. And I ran into a few problems trying to think about this. First was, well, maybe I should just interview someone that was an elder or something during that time. But the problem is with how our memories work. Now, I am no neurological expert here, but I'm a fairly well-read person and I think about things a lot. So here's my very rudimentary and basic understanding of how your brain or your memory works. Well, I say here's my rudimentary understanding, and now I'm putting myself on the spot. I really should script these videos, but essentially you can think about your memory as like a self-lubricating door hinge, right? Every time you open that door, it lubricates itself and it makes it easier to open and close that door. So you get better and easier access to your memories. That's why you can remember things when, you get older and you're like, oh man, I still have these memories from when I was a child. Because over time, you continue to revisit those memories over and over and over and over again. Interestingly, this is what causes people to become a little bit more stubborn and narrow-minded as you get older, because you sort of reinforce those same memories and you keep opening those specific doors. But you have a whole host of doors in your house that is your brain, and some of them we just don't open. And what happens? Well, those door hinges don't get any lubrication, they rust out, and you don't have access to open that memory anymore. So for this reason, I didn't think it would be the best idea to get an understanding of what it was like or what it felt like to be a Jehovah's Witness in the 90s, because it would be this reinforced memory at best, which it would be absolutely valuable, but I wouldn't get a personal sense, and I guess it wouldn't satisfy my intellectual curiosity. So I thought about how I learn things best, and usually that's by immersion. If you say, hey, Wally, you're going to go to Germany in 3 weeks, I'm like, okay, well, give me some books and I'll try and figure something out, and I'll learn a few hundred expressions and some basic vocabulary and how to pronounce things and read a little bit. And then I get there and I'm rubbish. I can't read anything. I can't hear anything. None of it makes any sense because I don't have that immersive education. My brain specifically, when I fully dive into something, that is when I am firing on all cylinders. And I think a lot of people are like that as well. So I had the crazy, goofy idea of doing this experiment that I've concocted. What if I read every single Watchtower and every single Awake that was published, and I just chose 1995, and then I read everything that they've produced for Watchtowers and Awakes for 2024, and I just compared the two. And I read a lot of older Watchtowers and stuff, but a lot of times I'm just hitting Control F and searching for very specific words. I'm not reading the entire magazine and getting an overall sense. And that's what I wanted to get. I wanted to have an immersive experience so I could learn what Jehovah's Witnesses maybe were feeling about themselves and the organization back in their heyday versus how it would feel for a Jehovah's Witness in 2024. And so, for some stupid reason, I did this experiment. This has changed my entire perception of the downfall of Watchtower. Their fall from grace has been more dramatic than I think any of us have realized, because you just see yourself in the mirror every single day and you don't notice the changes. But when you look at that old photograph from 30 years ago, you're like, oh my God, my hair, what was I wearing? What was I thinking? I was such an idiot back then. And to put yourself in the mind of what the witnesses look like in their heyday and compare that to now, it's like I opened my third eye and I'm peering into a different dimension. Now I know what you're probably thinking. Oh, here goes silly little Wally being hyperbolic, trying to get clicks for his video again. Well, think what you may about that, but I truly feel that I've tapped into something a lot deeper. Doing this experiment really did open my eyes to what has happened to this organization. Now, first off, when you're like, oh, well, there's 100 hours back then and only 15 hours now. Well, they make a lot of videos now. I mean, don't you know that they spend all their time making videos now? Well, that's exactly what I thought at first, and every single person I talked this idea through with, they said the exact same thing. After saying, oh, there's only one Watchtower and one Awake, every single person said, oh, well, it's because they make so many videos. The excuse, I found out, was already built in and programmed in our heads. Yes, even us hardcore apostates that, sit in front of a camera and upload videos, hundreds of videos on YouTube. I was even tricked by Watchtower's propaganda that, oh, well, it's just because they make more videos now. And we all just somehow accepted this answer. The governing body not only pulled the wool over the eyes of Jehovah's Witnesses, they somehow managed to do it with ex-Jehovah's Witnesses as well. Everyone thought, oh, well, I mean, they just make more videos now. If you add up all of the videos that they make for a year, it's still not even half of the spiritual food that you're getting. And I have a bigger bone to pick with that, because when you actually take all of their videos into consideration and you're talking about it in the context of, shouldn't they be getting more spiritual food as they get closer to the end? Most of the videos that they make aren't anything new. The JW broadcasting, for instance, about 2 years out, or 2 months out of the year, will be uploads of the Gilead graduation. The Gilead graduation already existed. It's not new spiritual food. Oh, well, they do interviews with people and everything. They used to do 1 to 2, about 4, 5, 6 page long interviews that were infinitely more in-depth and interesting about a person's backstory and informative about what they were doing in their local territory or whatever, than, those goofballs sitting on the couch doing the inside story like, oh, look, you're wearing a fur coat. Does that mean it was cold there? Ah, ha, ha, ha. My golly gee willikers, my little toesies were all little icicles. Hee hee, but we found a fire and it was all good. No, those are crap, especially when you compare it to what they had before. So anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here already. But after that, you think, oh, okay, well, they make movies what about the movies that they make for the conventions now? Well, even if you tot up all of the time and you just compress that, it's not actually that significant of a portion of the convention. And the movies they make, before, in the 90s, you were getting movies that felt like you were getting a documentary about the history of the organization, about how they were doing translating of the Bible, about what they went through in Nazi Germany. You were getting very in-depth documentaries. What are you getting now for videos? Women pensively looking at baby Jesus for 40 minutes. We did a whole convention review, and most of that new Jesus drama was this. They weren't even talking. Are you trying to suggest to me that that somehow is spiritual food that will satisfy someone whenever they are getting more pressure from Satan and from the world? And oh man, now that I saw someone do this, now all of a sudden I feel like I can meet the financial burdens that I have and become a pioneer. No one is doing that. And it's shocking that, again, I'm including myself in this. It is shocking that all of us just thought, oh, well, they're making less spiritual food now, or they're not making less spiritual food now. It's just different spiritual food because it's in video format. But it's not. It's just not. It's objectively less. And it makes no sense. And I think it is really getting at the root of why Jehovah's Witnesses are starting to feel so miserable. So I'm going to be making a whole host of videos breaking down some of the variances and differences just so you guys can see exactly what I'm on about. But I want to just give 3 main takeaways that really highlight these 3 core identifying principles of being a Jehovah's Witness. That of, being a witness, being a student, and then third kind of is that the end is always so close. So first off, being a student of the Bible. Now, I think this relates to why it felt so cool and special being a Jehovah's Witness in a unique way. See, a high control group or a cult or a religion, if you make that person feel like they are part of something special or that they have some kind of unique knowledge that the rest of the world doesn't have, it helps keep them excited and energized. They can have that smug little smile on their face like, you might have slammed the door on my face, but just you bet your balls that you're going to die at Armageddon and I'm going to be living in your house. So I bet you wish you had this, cool insider knowledge. It's not just Jehovah's Witnesses that do this. Go on your home web browser right now, and you will find this tactic. It's dying because all of us recognize it now, but people still try it with multi-level marketing schemes or sign up for this course, that. But you'll see something like the 3 tips that Warren Buffett would have if he had $10,000 right now. 3 AI stocks that no one wants you to know about. You are going to see this, sign up for my program, follow these steps, buy my book, buy my whatever webinar, and I will give you the secret inside knowledge that they don't want you to know. You are smelling what I'm stepping in here. It is a very common tactic for trying to control people, make them feel superior to other people. And boy, oh boy, throughout the 90s, they had more thick, dense, interesting doctrine. When you would read a Watchtower, you had to actually pay attention because they're always tying in, okay, well, this scripture here means this thing here, and this is how many candlelights were in Revelation, and because of those candlelights, they actually shine a spotlight over on how, many sex toys that Jeremiah was buying, and when he went into the sex shop, he had 30 pence, and 30 pence actually brings us to 1942, and 1942 is when blah, blah, blah happened in the world, so therefore, they would do all of this crazy, nonsensical, like an insane person, with a map or whatever, tying the strings and connecting it all together. That's what it felt like reading those. But after I got past the absurdity of it, I found myself like really getting into it, trying to like intellectually think about it and understand, like, okay, what are they actually talking about? What are they getting into? And this is a wonderful way of keeping people in and controlling people. It gives them something that makes them feel superior to other people. And all of that is tied into their identity of being a student of the Bible. So because of their study in the scriptures and because they were taking so much time to read the Bible and read all these scriptures and understand all of these prophecies and the wheat and the weeds and the sheep and the goats and the types and antitypes, the king of the north, the king of the south, all of these different things. Because they were taking that time, it made them feel special. And now, what do they have? They have Watchtower articles in 2024 where the subheadings are what we know and what we don't know. What we know and what we don't know. they would not have been talking about what they don't know, because they kind of just knew everything. And when you say, oh, well, we don't really know, are you going to sign up for that person's special insider information about how to invest in AI cybersecurity stocks for the future? He's like, well, this might work. I don't really know that it'll work, but hey, do you want to pay $5,000 for this course? And I'll teach you something that maybe will work. I don't really know, but trust me, bro. No one's going to do that. And what would happen to your mind if your identity was intrinsically linked that you have this special knowledge and then someone just took it away from you? They just came and stole one of the most important things to you. Something that made you tick, something that informed your life decisions, your career, your medical treatment, your children's education, how much time you would spend with your family, where you would take vacations, how you'd spend your weekends, what you would watch on TV, what you would read in a magazine, what movies you would go and see, who you would actually talk to. If you have a family member that's not a Jehovah's Witness, would you just completely cut that person out of your life? Who are going to be your friends? Are you going to celebrate holidays? Every single decision was tied to this special understanding. And they silently, progressively, and gradually took that away from people. And now, what are they left with? Trust the governing body, because that's all you have left. And that is what their religion has basically come down to. Just trust the governing body. I don't know why, but hey, you already paid the $5,000. Now you're getting the secret information. It turns out, LOL, slap ya, gotcha. It's not secret information. They don't actually really know. So that was the first thing that was readily apparent. Now about this preaching. Now to talk about being a witness for Jehovah, being a Jehovah's Witness. The preaching work was always being talked about in this positive light. And they had all of these tangible numbers and statistics that they were pointing to constantly. Every single life story that they talked about in 2024 amounted to, yeah, I was born a Jehovah's Witness, and sometimes it was hard to be a pioneer because I wanted to do other stuff, but I did it anyway, and I was blessed for it. Nothing specific, everything was super generic. And then in the 90s, it was, oh man, I suffered through being imprisoned, and I was shunned by my family because I just wanted to be a Jehovah's Witness so badly. And then I was beaten, and I was kicked out of the house, and then I had to become a refugee in another country. And when I was in a prison, I was sneaking in copies in cake in order to get little micro whatevers made of the Watchtower magazine. And I would hand copy those, and I'd pass them along to the other prisoners. It was an exciting story. The link that they would go to do their preaching work, and it had results. It wasn't just, I'm happy that I did it. It was, when I went there were 5 congregations, or 5 people. Now there's 5 congregations, and there's 1,200 people. Oh man, we have 5 kingdom halls on this island, and when I showed up, there was nothing. You want to know a crazy thing? Is they were talking about their building projects in the 90s, and oh man, what a wonderful blessing, and we need this because of all of the progress that we were making. Every single one of those building projects, when I was trying to find it, I mean, I could have missed a couple or something, but when I looked up on jw.org, if I could go to that kingdom hall that they were so blessed to be building, all of them were sold. No, none of them existed anymore. That is what Jehovah's Witnesses have now. That's the reality of the situation. In the 90s, they're building stuff in unique, random islands. Now they're like, hey, do you have the internet? Cool. Zoom. Bye. And thanks for helping us build this kingdom hall. We'll cash it out now. So the preaching work, you could see the results of it. You could see it in your own personal ministry. Every single person and story that they told or talked about or interview or whatever it was had said, oh man, I have, 5 Bible studies, and I've had the privilege of baptizing 5 people. If you went to a kingdom hall right now and asked how many of Jehovah's Witnesses had helped someone that they met in the door-to-door preaching to the point of baptism, you might get 1 person per kingdom hall. That's how rare it is nowadays. And they've had this slow progression downwards to where their preaching work seems dumb now. Like this thing that was so special to them, the most important work, this life-saving work. If you don't go preaching, you are going to have blood on your hands. And the organization that taught them that everything was so special and so important just took it away from them and said, hey, why don't you go stand by a cart? And if someone asks you a question, don't try and answer it. Play them a video. It turned them into robots. And I don't think Jehovah's Witnesses entirely realize that they are just robots when they go out and preaching. Gone are the days of the exciting stories of going through snake-infested rivers on little tiny canoes and building a kingdom hall out of mud and sticks. And now it's go stand next to that cart and, point people to jw.org. And think about how more effective they were able to be because they had all of the different Watchtower and Awakes to talk about. You had an endless amount of topics that covered everything you could possibly imagine. If you had a collection, I would say of like 5 to 7 years of Watchtower and Awakes from the 70s, 80s, 90s, you could cover like every topic on planet Earth. So whatever, I remember when my grandma, she had these boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of Watchtower and Awake magazines in the back of her car. And they were all labeled, perfectly filed. Any subject that came up, if she got a objection from someone, it didn't matter what it was. She would always go back to her car. I got just the magazine for you. Boom, bop, bing, whoop. And it was like, oh, wait, this lady has something about grasshoppers because I told her, hey, sorry, I'm busy. I'm trying to train my grasshoppers for the grasshopper circus. And this crazy white lady just came in and gave me an article about grasshoppers. Hey, maybe this is from God. That's pretty cool. It turns out I was just praying. Maybe this is a sign from God. And then people might be more interested to become a Jehovah's Witness. It was all of these random events that no doubt helped people at least get their foot in the door and explore their spirituality to a larger degree. And all of that has been replaced by, hey, go show them this video. Well, how long are they you only have 10, 12, 20 videos designed for the preaching work? That's not very much. And they don't cover that many topics. Like, what else are you going to go and talk about? They just don't have the proper tools to be effective preachers. So you have your identity as a student, that's gone. You have your identity as a preacher, that's gone. But what about this one that creates the fear and anxiety in people that ultimately does keep them in the organization? The sense that we're always living in the very end times, the last days. I hadn't quite realized how often that they were pointing to how few anointed Christians were left on the earth as a reminder to everyone that the end was just right around the corner. This was something that I knew about, and I knew because a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses and ex-Jehovah's Witnesses are obsessed with the number of memorial partakers. I feel like that the number of people obsessed with that is slowly diminishing because their whole faith is just getting watered down. But throughout all of those watchtowers, every single one that I read made reference to the limited amount of anointed Christians left here on the earth, and that being a direct sign of the nearness of the times. So you had the signs of the times were all of the bad things happening in the world. And my, oh my, did they love pointing to AIDS? What were the other ones? I mean, that was like the biggest one. The wars and conflicts and the anointed Christians. And they were just constantly pointing to those. And I feel like they still had people with a working memory of living through World War II. And now that that's pretty rare, it's hard. It's hard to just beat this drum about, oh man, the war is war. Well, before you had people that had lived through the war. And, these were all of your hardcore witnesses, and they were the foundation of your congregation. And now that all of them are gone, people are stuck around thinking, well, what is the sign of the times? What is this message that we are living in the last days? Like the governing body, they talk about it all the time. They say, oh, we're living in the last days. We got to be prepared. Last days this, Armageddon right around the corner. But something changed with that message. Instead of it being, oh, we're living in the last days because of, it's now, we're just living in the last days, guys. Well, in the 90s, this good news of the kingdom will be preached in all the inhabited earth. 2024, well, you can't really say that we'll be preaching in all the inhabited earth. I mean, it's going to be pretty tough for us to reach everyone. I'm not joking. That is what they say now. In 2024, it's like, well, Matthew 24:14, it's kind of symbolic, the whole earth. I mean, come on, you can't preach to everybody, can you? Or back then, no. We are going to go anywhere. There is nothing that can stop us. If find some civilization under the ice in Antarctica, we are going to be the first ones to build a kingdom hall in Antarctica with the ice people. We will preach to them. Nothing is going to stop us. Now it's just, maybe we'll get around to it perhaps, but hey, the end, trust us, it's right around the corner. So I feel like that nearness, because they had people that were of the anointed, and they were all getting older, and people were like, man, everyone's getting older, all of these anointed and the partakers, and it's going down, down, down. Man, we must be right there. Everything's so close. Now they're all gone. Where's that urgency now? Where does that come from? And it comes from just because they're being told to. And that is the biggest conclusion that I was able to reach with all of this, is nothing has a foundation anymore. It's just because the governing body says so. And I bet if you went and tried to talk to any Jehovah's Witness relatives right now, and you tried to bring things up that might wake them up, I reckon your success rate will be pretty low, because you'll reach a corner where they don't want to pick up their Bible, because they just, Bible, who reads the Bible anymore? They don't want to look at any of the old literature or anything. That's old light. We don't do that. So why are they Jehovah's Witnesses? What explanation will they give you? The governing body said so. The organization told us. And that is the biggest takeaway that I've had from this, is they've become this organization superpower. Everything's hyper-focused. Organization. Trust the organization. Don't doubt the organization. Don't read any news stories that are negative against the organization. Everything's protecting their own self-image. And it's so blatantly, obviously, a man-made goofballs in New York coming up with all of this crap and not justifying it at all, to the point where it's like even changing their policies and just saying, turns out that wasn't actually biblical. Well, what about the witnesses that have been part of this for 50 years that have been taught that, hey, this is biblical, and now this guy's going to just tell me that it's not? Who are you to tell me what's biblical or not, bub? I've been a Bible student longer than you've been alive, bucko. I can fully understand now the frustration of a Jehovah's Witness trying to make sense of what their religion has become. It is an abomination. The differences are so drastic. And if they ever take a second to think about it, it would drive them crazy and make them depressed. And that's why I think this depression is so difficult to understand, is it's been so tiny and progressive. It's like a perfect poetic metaphor, not a metaphor, but a perfect poetry that all of us ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, not all of us, but a lot of us ex-Jehovah's Witnesses didn't even realize that the Watchtower and Awake magazine were down to 1 per year. And Jehovah's Witnesses didn't realize that the Watchtower and Awake magazine were down to 1 per year. And I think that perfectly sums up exactly what's happened to the joy and happiness that once was the Jehovah's Witnesses. I hope you guys enjoyed these insights that I've been able to bring. This video was a long time in the making, but I will actually have a lot to talk about. And like I said before, I'm going to go into some detail, whether it's in dedicated videos or if I'm talking about a subject, I can be like, oh, because I have a lot of like bookmarks and references and stuff like, hey, this is actually boom, 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 boom. And instead of it just being the Control F looking for a specific point, I kind of have an idea about like the feeling and everything behind it now. So anyway, I'm kind of glad that I did this, kind of not, because it was so dang time consuming. But with all that being said, I hope you enjoyed it. And if you're still around, don't forget to drop a like on the video. It helps get out to more people on YouTube, and I would very much appreciate it. With all of that, stay safe, be kind, and don't forget to show yourself the same kindness that you show to others. And you better have a good ass day.